You're live. Hold on, sounds being weird. Yeah, it's fine on my. I'm gonna. No, 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 no. I can hear you. It's the streaming shit. I'm gonna go to. I will. I just checked this too before we went live. Speakers. Oh, I know what it did. It say. Da, 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 da.
Okay, so good now? Okay, well, rewind a couple seconds.
Right.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again. Great to be here as always.
I look forward to these conversations. It's there are people that I interview who break my brain, but intentionally because I want that to happen. But none quite as uniquely as you break my brain. Um, and I got a bunch of notes taken down for this. I'm really I'm looking forward to it. But you just told me that you had a point to make about
Right.
the Assange show trial, which of course is why I'm in DC right now. We've got some pretty high impact events and demonstrations planned that we're looking forward to getting at. So let me know what you got to say about that.
Well, what I wanted to point out is how a lot of the cowardly politicians who back in the last election cycle were saying like, I love WikiLeaks, Julian Assange is great and all that stuff. This election cycle, just as the Assange trial is about to start, they start promoting pardoning Edward Snowden, but are completely silent on Julian Assange. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this huge PR push to, pardon Snowden now. Why not mentioning Assange at all when Assange is the one in real danger, right? Compared to Edward Snowden, who's not about to be, extradited in a ridiculous show trial, right? So definitely worth pointing that out. So you're having like Matt Gaetz, you're having even Trump talk about it, and that's totally intended, in my opinion, to distract from what's going on with the Assange trial, make the discussion all about Snowden, who's not about to be extradited. At the exact point when there should be focus on this. So I think people, need to not fall into that trap and realize where that came from. I'm not saying don't pardon Edward Snowden, right? So don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that the timing of that is very planned, right, to distract from the trial.
Without a doubt, and at least I've seen on Twitter and a number of times when the subject of pardoning Ed Snowden comes out, like it will get flooded with Assange supporters going, okay, but what about?
Right.
And there's whoever posted about Ed will never address anything about Julian Assange, and it in the first place, like where Ed is at and what Ed is doing, you're right. You're absolutely right. He's in a much more stable, secure environment than the Guantanamo Bay of the United Kingdom, getting, subject to solitary confinement 23 and a half hours a day. Monday, tomorrow, will be the first time Julian sees his lawyers in 6 months. Like,
Well, that
that's
seems
fucking
unfair.
crazy. Yeah.
Wow.
I was
Well, what's
talking.
also interesting too, right before this pardon stuff for Snowden started, he started tweeting in support of this, the alleged poisoning of this Navalny guy, who's basically, I call him NATO Navalny, because he's basically like the NATO-funded Russian opposition figure.
Mhm.
But anyway, so like Snowden doesn't need to comment on Russian politics. Like no one follows him for his comments on Russian politics, you know what I mean? But he, before there was even any evidence and it came out, he said it was a poisoning and all this stuff, and was sort of, it's a narrative that Hillary Clinton's promoting right now, right? So it just kind of seems odd that he would, make comments like that, and then there's this push to pardon him, right, at the time when attention needs to be on the other, famous.
And Ed is still chair of Freedom of the Press Foundation.
Yeah, that's
and
fucked over
FPF
Assange royally for years. Yeah, with the
FPF
OMDR crowd. Yeah.
Yeah, like not only did they throw Julian under the bus, they like backed it up and then rolled forward again and backed it up a few more times just to make sure it stuck. And like John Cusack is still on the board of that organization.
Yeah.
It's so weird to me. And like I know people who are pretty close to Ed and like, have genuine concern for him and genuine respect for him. And it's always like, it's just weird to me because they should be parallel situations. That's the lawnmower I was talking about.
Oh, is it? It sounds like an airplane.
Right, yeah. Like, this is gonna be interesting.
Oh, it's fun. It just, we can pretend they're Blackhawks.
Right?
Like coming to raid the show.
He looks like he could be Intel. Jesus H. God damned it Christ. At any rate, I would like to be able to mute so you can talk.
All right, sure. Ask me a thing.
Let's lead with the Transition Integrity Project and kind of break down what that is, and we'll go through who the key players are.
All right, right on. So the Transition Integrity Project is this group that was basically, it was officially co-founded by this lady named Rosa Brooks, who has a couple different affiliations we can go over, and this other guy named Nils Gilman. They're both tied to this billionaire Silicon Valley cabal that's all obsessed with artificial intelligence and remaking the U.S. economy and things like that. They also, Rosa Brooks has ties to the Obama and Clinton administrations of the past, and also the George Soros funded Open Societies Foundation, which of course has been involved in color revolutions the world over, including the coup in Ukraine, right, where Pierre Omidyar, who's another funder of a think tank where this lady works and who we were just talking about, right, he also funded the color revolution in Ukraine. So definitely worth pointing that out before we get into what this group does. But basically, those are the co-founders, but it's heavily populated by neocons. I mean, you have people like Bill Kristol, you have David Frum, you have people like Michael Chertoff, the first head of DHS, whose mom was Mossad and is just generally a creepy dude who now runs the Chertoff group, which is populated with a bunch of former CIA and NSA officials that work for him as private consultants now. Definitely a lot of shady people on the Republican side. They're all pretty much anti-Trumpers, though. Like the Lincoln Project people are also there. By the way, and then on the other side, you have a lot of DNC people. You've like John Podesta, you've Donna Brazile, and you have former Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, and a whole mess of people on there. And basically, what these people are doing as part of this Transition Integrity Project, it's to ensure integrity, they say, in the presidential transition process. Of course, when neocons say integrity, it's obviously the opposite, right? So, just pretty straightforward there in that sense, I guess. But this group is conducting these simulations about the election, specifically what happens after Election Day, between Election Day and Inauguration Day. There's another group that has a lot of overlapping members. That's their sister organization that's called the National Task Force on Election Crises, that's been simulating stuff since last year regarding the lead up to Election Day. right? And a lot of that stuff we're seeing now. And like I said earlier, it's DNC people and it's people associated with the 2012 Mitt Romney campaign, which are neocons because, they were, Romney's main policy advisors were Foreign Policy Initiative people, which is Foreign Policy Initiative doesn't exist anymore, but it's the successor to PNAC, founded by Kagan, Bob Kagan and Bill Kristol. Right. So basically what they're doing is simulating what they say will be, they're telling you, right, a dark 11 weeks between Election Day and Inauguration Day. And they claim to exist because they're saying Trump isn't going to leave office and there's going to be a constitutional crisis. They basically say that the only scenario where there isn't some crazy constitutional crisis is if Biden wins by a landslide, essentially saying you have to vote for Biden en masse or there will be mass chaos and doom for the American public, which basically sounds like, neocon DNC CIA blackmail, to put it another way. It's definitely not democratic, and they claim they exist. They're simulating all this stuff to safeguard democracy from Trump, when in fact, if you look at what their simulations involve, including their scenario for what happens if Trump wins by a landslide, right, and a clear Trump victory, I mean, it's just literally insane. But before I go into that, I want to preface, I'm not trying to be pro-Trump here. I definitely think that both sides of the election here are basically creating this situation, engineering this situation where there is a major election crisis. And I think there's a lot of different motives for that. And my reason for saying that doesn't just have to do with, what I've written about this group, but also stuff I've been doing all year, including stuff I wrote in January before a lot of this election chaos was around about the Cybereason election 2020 simulations, which were all tied up with US and Israeli intel also.
I think the guy's almost done mowing, right?
Great.
You've got you put a quote in your article, motherfucker. We do it live. You have a quote in your article from Hillary Clinton that says, I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he'll win if we don't give an inch and if we are as forceful and relentless as the other side is. And that in and of itself is just so like dictatorial and creepy and just massive, just like. So there's a theory.
They're installing someone. They're talking about installing someone. But keep in mind, they're saying this is about Biden. Biden isn't going to make it to Inauguration Day, most likely. I mean, they're going to plop in Kamala. I mean, they already said how they're going to do this, because as soon as he announced Kamala as the VP, they're like, oh, now we have protocols for what happens if Joe Biden gets COVID-19 and tests positive for COVID-19, right? Which is really easy to do. You don't even have to take a COVID-19 test to test positive, right? Because like people that have waited in line and shit, but never actually took the test, get shit mailed to them saying they tested positive. So really easy for Joe Biden to test positive whenever the heck he wants, right? So then Kamala becomes the nominee.
One of our activists here, the woman who runs Action for Assange Denver, Kendra Christian, she has a nurse friend who said, okay, well, I had to take the COVID test, and the test came back negative, but she was still going to self-quarantine for 14 days. And during that 14 days, she did not take a follow-up test, but received a letter saying that she had tested positive for COVID.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm saying, like the whole thing is like not being done in the way they claim it's being done. It's not being done responsibly. It's very willy-nilly, if you will, right? So it's just the fact that they put that out there, though, this whole Biden Kamala thing. So when they're saying like, oh, we're gonna like when Clinton's saying we're eventually gonna drag this out, and I'm confident Biden will be the one that wins. Well, come Inauguration Day, if not before, I mean, it's going to be Kamala that's in there. And this was always the DNC's plan, if you remember, way back before the primary. She was the one that was chosen by all the ex-former Clinton donors and the Silicon Valley billionaires, who I mentioned earlier, and who are also basically funding the people that created this Transition Integrity Project, right? Those are the people that love her, right? And it's worth keeping in mind, too, the Silicon Valley billionaires are also the people that destroyed the Iowa caucus results. Remember, that was Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn, one of the main funders of that. He's also a big funder of a lot of these, like the think tank that Rosa Brooks works for, New America. A big funder there. That just
sounds creepy as fuck. What?
Oh, yeah. You want to talk about them a little bit? They're nuts.
Let's go into that. I just wanted to make a point that the Transition Integrity Project in and of itself is basically making a public statement that their mission is continuity of government and continuity of this.
Continuity of government, yeah. I mean, that's what it's about. Well, it's about that in a couple different ways, right? Because if you know what continuity of government actually means to people in DC, that is what it's about. Because Rosa Brooks, in addition to being part of like New America and the Open Society, whatever, she's also part of Georgetown University's program of innovative policing, right? She's also a cop herself now, a reserve cop in DC, and is now writing a book about it called Tangled Up in Blue.
Are you the name of her book coming out?
No, and her research interest, she says this pretty publicly, is the blurring line between military and police crime in war, right? So, that doesn't sound good, does it? Also, 10 days after Trump was inaugurated in 2017, she wrote an article in Foreign Policy magazine, from the CFR, saying, laying out all these four possibilities of how to remove Trump before 2020, remove him from office. And one of them was a military coup, straight up saying, use the military to overthrow Trump. So this lady is clearly deranged, right? And so we're supposed to believe that she's leading this integrity project for the transition between elections, between presidential administrations, right? It's just nuts. And it's worth pointing out, too, as I mentioned earlier, the scenario where Trump wins by a landslide, what these people plan to do. And the person that was playing Biden in the simulation, by the way, John freaking Podesta of Podesta email fame, right? It's just nuts. So anyway, what they ended up doing is that they, Biden refused to concede, and then they had governors from 3 allied states send different electors to the Electoral College that were going to vote for Biden instead of Trump, even though Trump won those states. It's like super illegal to do that, right? And then they demand all these structural reforms, what they call structural reforms to the U.S. election system that involves making a bunch of new states, giving statehood to Puerto Rico, giving it to Washington, D.C., and dividing California into 5 states, basically creating, a supermajority for, establishment Democrats for the foreseeable future, which is something that would never happen, right? And then
in very Orwellian language, they refer to it as Cascadia too. It's almost like Oceania. It's all, it's fucking cartoonish, and that's becoming it's almost trite for me to say now, even though I've been for 2 years I've been saying we live in a fucking cartoon, and every goddamn day something happens, and it's this is fucking cartoonish. Let's dive into New America a little bit, because it's almost like one of those things where there's a conspiracy about these people are all involved in ritual magic, and the only way for their spells and shit to work is that they have to declare intent. And all of this is just a declaration of intent, down to the naming of these little things, these initiatives. So what is New America in and of itself? What functions?
It used to be the New America Foundation. Now it's just called New America. It's run by this lady named Anne Marie Slaughter is her last name. Seems pretty on point, I guess you could say. But they claim to exist to basically analyze the disruptions to society caused by, developments in technology and societal pressures and whatnot, and, capitalize off of those opportunities, to make changes. So that's like a paraphrasing of their mission statement. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's in my article. Their top funders, aside from the U.S. State Department, are the Rockefeller Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Eric Schmidt is actually, of the Silicon Valley billionaires, the biggest of them all to this thing. He gives them like $4 million a year. And you have Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn, who we mentioned earlier, right, is tanking the Iowa caucus results. You have Pierre Omidyar, and you also have Jeffrey Skoll, who a lot of people don't know, but he funds a lot of similar things to Omidyar. He's also an eBay billionaire that used to work under Omidyar and has the Skoll Foundation. Then you have Craig Newmark Philanthropies, who's the Craigslist guy. He's crazy. He funds all the stuff like the Trust Project and NewsGuard and all like the anti-fake news stuff that's, been targeting people like you and me for years now, right? So, these are the guys that are behind New America. So given their focus on, the disruptions that new developments in technology create in society and how to capitalize off of that and shift, America or policy or society in certain directions, given those disruptions, that's what New America essentially does, according to themselves anyway. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, and Eric Schmidt is involved in basically every single dystopian project.
Yes.
And the reason we know most of this is because of you and your research and your work.
He's the new Kissinger. There's like mainstream media articles that actually call him that, but Henry Kissinger is quoted as calling Eric Schmidt his like best friend now. We've become best friends. That should scare the fuck out of you, because Henry Kissinger is like 90 whatever. I mean, he'll hopefully die eventually.
I'm going to.
But this is the guy.
I've said it before, and you're invited. I'm going to throw a party every year on the anniversary of Kissinger's death. If I don't, assuming I outlive him, but I don't have access to adrenochrome, so I'm not 100% that that's going to happen. But I will. I will host a gathering every year in honor of Henry Kissinger's death. I'm inspired to do that by people who do the same thing for Margaret Thatcher.
I didn't know people did that for her. That's kind of amazing. All right, but yeah, no, I totally support that. But anyway, so Henry Kissinger, right? Because of his advanced age, can't be the evil genius that he's been for years. So now Eric Schmidt appears to be has had the torch passed to him at some point. Anyway, Eric Schmidt is, if you haven't been following what he's been involved with lately, he has essentially fashioned himself, per the New York Times, the new liaison between Silicon Valley and the Department of Defense. And is basically the guy that, more than anyone else, has essentially fused the intelligence community, the Pentagon, and Silicon Valley all into one giant, ungovernable blob that has no oversight and wants to decide the future of American society, whether that's, how AI is implemented in the U.S. economy or surveillance systems, or any of that stuff. All of AI policy is basically being charted out by the National Security Commission on AI that he chairs with this guy named Bob Work, who's an ex-Pentagon guy that's super cozy with Schmidt and Kissinger also. And it's all about, it all sort of revolves around the role of China. Are we going to try and leapfrog China or collaborate with China and all this stuff? Is basically what it boils down to. And, their argument for what the U.S. needs to do in order to avoid collaborating with China is to create a crazy Orwellian panopticon far beyond anything implemented in any Chinese megacity throughout the U.S., so that we have more data being fed into U.S.-made artificial intelligence algorithms, thereby making them more powerful than the ones that Chinese giant tech companies are making up, right? Because, China has massive tech companies just like the U.S. does that are equally, shady and powerful. So it's not, a lot of people get mad at me and say I'm like anti-China or whatever. I'm not really taking a position. I'm just pointing out that there's like giant, corporations, tech corporations that have a similar agenda to what Microsoft and, all of the Silicon Valley companies in the U.S. do. And it's either, are we going to go to war with them and do an AI arms race, or all those, companies going to work together to create, the AI panopticon of the future for the world's population, or will we do it separately? That's basically what these people are debating without any sort of, they don't want input from Americans about this, right? Because, any sort of mass implementation of what they want to do in either scenario, right, involves, a lot of jobs going away forever, permanent UBI slavery, and all of this stuff, increased surveillance, smart everything, including smart toilets, which is insane. Business Insider with an article talking about how they can, scan your anus like a fingerprint. Are you fucking kidding me? Right? But that's to these people, it's like, oh, it's good because it's more data, and it's like, leave my asshole alone.
Right?
But,
if you
want input from people, you know what I mean? Because people would be like, the fuck?
Apparently, everyone's butthole has a unique signature. Like, there's a company that sells chocolates of your asshole mold. I'm serious. Butthole chocolates. I'm not even fucking kidding you. It's been around for a couple of years.
No.
And that takes eating ass to an entirely different level. It really does.
Oh my god.
But also, one of the very early warnings about coronavirus was you should be careful with whose ass you eat. And it's a fucking clown shoe. It really is. When we had to evacuate Boulder Creek because of the wildfires, which I got a text in the middle of a free Assange vigil. I'm live on the air and my phone goes, "You need to evacuate now." And at first I'm like, is this real? Because I'm fucking paranoid. But yes, it was in fact real. The first night we had to grab a hotel in Cupertino, which is where Apple is. And it's their headquarters. And Cupertino has become a smart city.
Right.
Like, they market it as such. I couldn't get a cup of coffee in that town without first having to download an app and give it my information, because they've got every fucking business locked down, but you can still pick things up. Like, you can still order outside, and my barista brought out my coffee. But I couldn't walk in, physically hand them money. They're not accepting cash at all anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the plan of a lot of these National Security Commission on AI people, right? Basically, they want to make everything be you pay with your phone, mobile pay apps. They don't even want like debit and credit cards anymore. They don't want any cash, because apparently having it all on your smartphone is better for data collection for whatever reason. So, they want to keep it, like that. But there's a lot of other initiatives, like I was saying, that aren't going to be popular with the American people, which is why, for one, they're capitalizing off of the COVID-19, the whole situation with that, right, to implement a lot of this stuff. But I mean, they're definitely going to keep going farther, and I don't think they can use coronavirus as an excuse for much longer. For a lot of the things that they're going to keep pushing for. But I think it's interesting, you look at New York State, for example, and Governor Cuomo over there, basically putting Eric Schmidt in charge of reimagining life in the state post-corona, right? So
down to educating the children.
Yeah. Something New America, their main shtick of their foundation, they have a couple different sections, but their main, where most of their resources go to, is reimagining education. So anyone that wants to research that, should definitely look at New America, which is funded by Schmidt and all of these people, because that's a lot of, and Gates, right, who's also going to be on that special panel of reimagining life in New York. Also, New York is going to create 5 smart cities next year, all going to be built by Israeli companies. Unit 8200 stuff. They claim it was collaborative with Israel, but no American companies are building smart cities in Israel. So it's a one-way thing.
No, our American taxpayer dollars are funding the research in Israel that goes towards building smart cities in the U.S. with the help of Unit 8200.
Right.
I have now decided that the landscape guy is a professional and not a federal agent, just based on the technique he's using to edge the little spots of grass around there. I think he's about done. He'll be done right around the time we're done with this interview.
That's well well timed.
Right? So you talk about the uniparty,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Like as these never Trumpers, the people that are the Lincoln Project guys, the neoliberal elite that are behind all of this. And this is usually the part of the show where I drop the George Carlin quote, so I'm going to do that. Carlin says that bipartisan simply means that a larger than normal deception is taking place.
Yeah, this is true. Well, I mean, so like the Uniparty, I mean, I call them that because, the RNC and the DNC essentially are the same shit, right? And that's why you see them uniting together behind Biden, right? Because he's the Uniparty candidate, or rather, he and Kamala Harris, since, as I said earlier, it's very unlikely that Biden is actually going to be president, right? So,
Yeah.
when it comes to anything of consequence in U.S. politics, the Uniparty always agrees. I mean, basically, they want to keep people, at least during election season, debating over a couple of issues, being, gay rights, abortion, and will your taxes go up or not? And that's literally the realm of debate, and that's the public debate anyway. Because once these people are in office, they do the same shit anyway. Even the people that are conservative Republicans, when elected, expand the government in huge ways. Just look at the Bush administration, right? George W. Bush expanded the government in huge ways, using 9/11 as the excuse for that, right? And so, Trump, really not that different. Did he, decrease the size of government being a conservative in the White House? No. Right. And the deficit has gone way up and all this stuff. So even the stuff they publicly disagree about, when they're actually in office, they just do the same shit. Right. So it's basically the Uniparty has been in control of U.S. politics and the government for decades and decades and decades. And that's why there's all this continuity in policy, even though you have, different parties and they switch who's in the White House and who has the majority in Congress, but they agree about all the same shit. So the same shit just keeps happening. In a nutshell, that's the Uniparty.
Yeah, there's a reason why. I've tried for a very, very long time to phrase what our elections are as an exercise of which half of the duopoly gets to pretend like they're in charge over the other half of the duopoly, and all of our allowable conversations, all of our acceptable arguments are all couched within these very small parameters, like Chomsky talked about in Manufacturing Consent 30 fucking years ago. And here we are 30 years removed from that, and people are still falling into this bullshit trap that says you can only discuss peripheral social issues, but you can never have a conversation about the national security state or the surveillance state or what is happening with big tech merging with government. And I don't personally see any daylight between the State Department and Silicon Valley.
Well, you look at the National Security Commission on AI that I talked about a little bit earlier. That's three groups. It's the U.S. intelligence community, it's the Pentagon, and it's all the big Silicon Valley companies on there, right? That are directing all this policy for the future. The Pentagon and the intelligence community fused all their cybersecurity and AI initiatives together into one joint center. So they're really not that different anymore either, right? And a lot of people argue that DARPA has I think it's pretty accurate, has a lot of interagency tie over to the CIA, right? In terms of a lot of the experiments they conduct and whatnot, in the research they conduct. And actually DARPA was the springboard for IARPA, which is the intelligence community's own version of DARPA, and the former director of that, also on the National Security Commission for AI. And he has the main think tank in DC now, called the Center for Emerging Technology, that is basically the main think tank about artificial intelligence in Washington, DC right now. He's a super shady guy. He's also tied up with all the Dark Winter people, the Johns Hopkins guys, Thomas Inglesby, Tara O'Toole, the people that did the Dark Winter simulation before the anthrax attacks. He's like their protege, and he just really shady. Tara O'Toole's at the CIA right now at In-Q-Tel. So these are a lot of people that said, well, I kind of went on a tangent there, right? But for people that don't know what Dark Winter is, and you want to know what's going on right now, the roadmap for a lot of what's happening right now happened back with the 2001 anthrax attacks. And a lot of the policies, whether it's for vaccinations or throwing all this money around at all these different COVID-19 vaccine candidates, you know, all of that was set up using the 2001 anthrax attacks as an excuse. And a lot of the people making the vaccines for that, for the COVID-19 thing, also have ties to the anthrax attacks. So definitely worth revisiting that. So, you know, a lot of those same people end up overlapping with the intelligence community still even today, and you see them like in the National Security Commission on AI. So obviously, you know, not a group of people that have your best interests at heart, to say the least.
This is a good transition into your other article about the CTI League. But I will say quickly, for the people who are watching now that aren't regular viewers of Slow News Day, I had a fantastic interview with Whitney on Dark Winter. It's on the channel. If you're new here and you're digging what you're seeing, go ahead and subscribe to it. There's no way in hell YouTube will let you stay subscribed to this channel, but give it a shot as an exercise in I guess, futility. Let's jump into the cyber threat intel analysts and the CTI League, which sounds almost superhero-like.
They planned that.
Berman's put up played a clip from, like, I think the early 2000s, where they were showing like Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey and Eric Schmidt as superheroes. Like they had them turned into cartoons.
Like the Super Best Friends Club. Yeah, I know.
And that's basically what the CTI League is trying to pass themselves off as.
Yes. Right. So I think they chose that name intentionally because a lot of the first articles about them earlier this year called them the Cyber Justice League and be like, it's the Justice League for cybersecurity and all this stuff, like basically claiming like they're superheroes and all this stuff. If you actually look at who founded this shit, that should, you know, that illusion should fall away pretty quickly, right? But basically what this group has done is that they claim to be altruistic and they offer their services for free, and they offer to, you know, replace, you know, if you're at a hospital, for example, a lot of hospitals have laid off IT staffers this year. A lot of this is caused directly by federal government policy. I would argue it's probably intentional in order to force a lot of these institutions, whether it's healthcare institutions or other parts, you know, other aspects of critical infrastructure, either in healthcare or other systems in the U.S., force them to seek out the CTI League services, right? Because they you know, there's been a lot of budget cuts. HHS has basically forced several hospitals around the U.S. to get rid of their entire IT staff team and basically give IT over to longtime contractors for HHS and other companies and what have you. So, you know, since in order and at the same time, we're seeing like an uptick, right, in cyber attacks targeting hospitals and all that stuff. So obviously the combination of events there has forced a lot of these hospitals and clinics and what have you to partner with CTI League. Part of that being because CTI League is heavily promoted by the head of CISA, which is a relatively new U.S. Federal agency that's overseen by DHS, that's involved with the protection of critical infrastructure in the United States, and it's currently headed by a former Microsoft executive. And of course, the CTI League, two of their co-founders are also Microsoft goons who work for the Microsoft Security Research Center, which is involved with Election Guard, the DARPA-funded new election system. So kind of a conflict of interest there because, you know, of all the predictions of cyber attacks on election infrastructure and all of that. And the guy that's saying that our election infrastructure is not in the best state it could be, and Election Guard would make things better, is the guy leading that agency. And he used to work for Microsoft. Seems very convenient. Right?
Is that who Errol Weiss is?
No, his name is Chris Krebs, which is like a cartoon name. basically.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so Chris Krebs decided to partner directly with CTI League, even though no one knows who their membership is. It's supposed to be 1,400 people offering cybersecurity protection to these institutions for free, but no one, they're all anonymous except for the 4 co-founders. And the way you get in is that you fill out this contact form, which I looked at it. It doesn't really require much information from you at all. Just says, can anyone that's currently in the league vouch for you, right? Among other things. And it asks like a little basic stuff about what your experience is, whatever. So anyway,
So
any one of these
like
4
the
co-founders,
Freemasons, but crueler.
right. So like basically any one of these 4 guys can just say like, yeah, you're in, and then that person's in and no one really knows who they are. Super untransparent. To have the government partner with a group like this and be like, yeah, come onto the critical infrastructure of healthcare institutions and all this stuff is insanely irresponsible and honestly should be a massive scandal because it's ridiculous, right? But it's not, and that tells you that there's something else going on here. Microsoft and also the cybersecurity firm of the other founder, who we can get into in a little bit, who's an Israeli guy, have been predicting cyber attacks, brought about by Iran on election day, and also the healthcare system. The guy, the original founder of CTI League is a guy named Ohad Zaidenberg, who used to be Unit 8200. Well, Unit 8200, first of all, is like Israel's NSA, and they conduct all the offensive hacks on nation states, right? Such as those that have currently been targeting Iran all year and took out 25% of their internet, blew up a bunch of factories and grain silos and shit. Israel admitted involvement in that, essentially, and that was Unit 8200, right? So anyway, this guy, Ohad Zaidenberg, is the former commander of the unit targeting Iran specifically, right? The Persian analyst, he called himself, right? And then became commander of that unit, right? So he works for an Israeli cybersecurity firm founded by one of Israel's main contractors who set up their e-government platform for the Israeli government, right? And they coordinate with Israeli state-owned companies on a daily basis and are also tied up with companies like Verint, which used to be Converse Infosys, who, if you follow my work, you should know that they're probably the shadiest out there, and were involved with espionage of the U.S. federal government before and leading right up to 9/11. And their head guy, Kobe Alexander, was indicted in the U.S. for fraud and a bunch of other really shady stuff. Not a great company to openly announce your collaboration with, but they do. So anyway, Zaidenberg was the only source for the claim that Iran hacked Gilead earlier this year over its when the whole coronavirus thing was starting, and remdesivir, which is a Gilead antiviral drug, had just gotten an emergency use authorization for coronavirus. Zaidenberg comes along and is like, "Hey, I found that Iran is hacking Gilead, but don't worry, I foiled it for you." Right, making all these claims, and his only justification for claiming Iran was involved was, well, the people that did this, their behavior overlapped with the past activities of Iranian hacker groups. But he didn't say what the overlap was, what the past activities were, or the name of the Iranian group that it was supposedly similar to. He doesn't tell you any of that shit. Right. He's just like, believe me, because, I'm a guy that used to go after these guys. By the way, on his bio, he says that his work is still about targeting Iran as a strategic intelligence threat. Strategic intelligence target. Right. So, I mean, why people are believing this guy at a time when Israel has openly been cited by U.S. mainstream media as trying to get the U.S. into a war with Iran before the November election. Why Trump is still 100% in office, because they think he'd be more willing to support a war with Iran than Biden, Kamala, right? So definitely some shady shit there, But this is the guy who is choosing who gets into this league that's then protecting U.S. hospitals, healthcare institutions. But it's not just that anymore. They've expanded to cover, dams, nuclear reactors, chemical plants. This is all the stuff they're protecting for you, right? And so at the same time, we've been having this narrative seeded for over a year that China or Iran or both, or Russia too, maybe, who knows, are going to take down the U.S. power grid, right? They're going to hack, COVID-19 related things, whether that's hospitals or vaccine companies or people with cure, all this stuff. I mean, and essentially Zadenberg created this situation where he was able to blame Gilead at the same time that CTI League is protecting Gilead, by the way. I forgot to point that out. So CTI League was in the back door of Gilead when that hack happened that they foiled and blamed on Iran, right?
So that to me sounds like CTI or Clear Sky is responsible for the hack that they said they fixed and solved.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, also the hack, there was no reason to even freaking report it. I mean, because basically, even if no one actually like reads anymore, right? So if you actually read what this guy said about the freaking hack, it was that some executive at Gilead got an email with a spam link in it. And it's like, Iran's attacking Gilead. Like, are you kidding me, dude?
I mean, that's basically what the Reality Winner document said too. Like, if you read through those, there's a suggestion of a hack or a suggestion of like a phishing email scam, but no conclusive evidence that anyone followed through and clicked the link or that an actual physical hack took place. It's like a bad stand-up comic who just recycles material over a 20-year career and maybe updates the names a little bit, but doesn't really change the format of any of the jokes. And that's what we're seeing with these guys. And I think the only reason that Venezuela isn't included in this list of countries that are going to take down the power grid or hack the U.S. election is because the U.S. has sort of lost the narrative in that country in terms of taking it over, installing their puppet, and having another client state in the region.
Well, to an extent, I think in the case of Venezuela, they're going to try and, since the U.S. policy has been a bumbling failure there, they're going to try and, outsource regime change in Venezuela to their client states in South America, whether that's Colombia or Brazil or whatever, right? So they're just going to sort of pass the torch over to their, client states down in South America. That way they can also have plausible deniability, be like, well, it wasn't us doing it, right? Even if they're funding it and whatever. So, returning to this about the hacks and all of this, it's worth pointing out that Zadenberg, right, made this claim about Gilead and Iran, but also over the past several years, he's blamed Iran with similar explanations, right, over the past couple of years or so, for cyber attacks or hacks or whatever, with the same non-explanation, right? So it's also worth pointing out that the same guys that co-founded this with him that are from Microsoft have done the same shit. Right, and they're the source. For example, the Security Research Center are the same guys that last year. So last year they also are the people that blamed Iran for quote unquote hacking the Trump re-election campaign, and they were saying, look, this is proof that Iran is election meddling. But it was the same type of explanation. They just believed that Iran was involved, and they didn't really explain why. And the hack didn't actually do anything. It was an attempted hack, and they said it was unsophisticated, right? But they felt like they needed to go to mainstream media with it anyway, and it was just a single Microsoft analyst making this claim, and it was just, blasted everywhere at the same time when the intelligence community, the Pentagon, Bill Barr of the Department of Justice, they all issued this joint statement saying, oh yeah, they're gonna, Iran and China are going to hack 2020, basically. And they're gonna meddle in the election. Good timing there, Microsoft, which by the way, for people that don't know, not only is Microsoft tied up with Bill Gates and Silicon Valley and all this stuff, they're also a major contractor to the Pentagon in the intelligence community, right? So it's not just like we were saying earlier, Silicon Valley, like Microsoft, you need to think of all these Silicon Valley companies as deeply connected to intelligence and in the military these days. I mean, they're not a separate entity anymore.
Fucking leaf blower now.
Yeah, I got your
Like,
message. That's
came
why
up onto the porch here with the leaf blower, like looked at me and shrugged.
Can't you like ask him?
I'm
to
about ready to
wait?
like pay him $20 to fuck off the job for the rest of the day. Like, I don't know what he's getting paid to do the yard
Oh,
here.
man.
But yeah, dude, this is wild as fuck. I think we're like, it gotta be about done. He's walking back to the truck. I missed like half of that, but what I basically gathered from it is that Microsoft is full of scumfucks and they shouldn't be trusted for any reason whatsoever.
Yeah, well, yeah, basically. So anyway, there's this cyber attack narrative, this narrative that's been set up by these these cybersecurity firms that have just given like these mealy-mouthed non-explanations for why they're blaming particular nation states that would never hold water in court or like the court of public opinion, but instead like mainstream media, a lot of these outlets that report on this stuff just like cite these guys and then just like amplify it and don't critically think or question anything and don't ask for evidence and are like, yeah, we'll just take your word and run with it, guys, you know? So
what a sorry state that the media in general exists not as
stenographers.
Well, it's not. I mean, stenographers copy it down, but they don't necessarily amplify without questioning. Like, it's just their job to jot shit down. And we've got entire organizations whose job and basically mission it is to uncritically dump gasoline on this fire and then walk away and go, holy shit, do you see the size of that fire? Like, and that's their primary fucking function. It is insane to me. We have been going about an hour, and I have like, people get the impression that me going to Washington, D.C. to do all this is kind of like a vacation. And it's not. I've been working 21 hours a day since I got here, catching little naps in between. I mean, we've got a lot of shit going on that there's just a handful of us organizing it. We have a panel that we helped put together for Wednesday with Dan Ellsberg and Chris Hedges and Jacob Goodell, that Popular Resistance was also a part of. Woke up this morning to a phone call that Kevin Zeese had passed away. And before it was announced on Twitter or anything like that, I was actually asked not to say anything until Margaret Flowers had come out and made a statement, and Medea Benjamin did too. So that adds another wrinkle into what we're doing. This is just fucking, it's wild. I'm trying as hard as I can to just stay caffeinated and push through, but I've got a fuck ton on my plate for the rest of the Whitney, I can't thank you enough for coming back on the show. I love it when you're here. The audience loves it when you're here. It is always a fascinating conversation. Please remind people where they can find your work on all of the platforms, and welcome to Rockfin.
Right. So I'm on Rockfin now. You can I have a premium Rockfin premium podcast that I'm going to be doing. I already have it up, right? So if you're on Rockfin, you can go and check that out. Also free on Rockfin, I'm going to have audio versions of all my new articles, because a lot of people have asked for that, saying they either don't have time to read, or a lot of times when they consume information, they're at work and they can only listen, right? So for if you're like that, you can check out my Rockfin channel. It's not under my name, it's under the name of my website, Unlimited Hangout, where a lot of my work is being published now. I'm currently publishing for The Last American Vagabond still, but also for my page, Unlimited Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at _Whitney Webb, and that's really about it, because I don't have a Facebook anymore. Well, I mean, I lost access to it like years ago, and it's floating around, but you won't hear from me on there, right? And I'm not on YouTube or anything like that. So it's basically just Rockfin and Twitter and my website for now.
And your website also features some of Vanessa Beeley's work as well.
Yep.
And I had
and Raul Diego, who's a staff writer at Mint Press, and we did the Dark Winter series together and some other stuff. So you can follow our work on there. Vanessa just had a really great expose about the new group trying to replace the white helmets, and they're trying to, I guess, capitalize off of the coronavirus crisis in Syria to get some, PR for them. And
she was on this show 2 weeks ago. And
I watched
and went
it,
into that a little bit. Thank you. Yeah, no, that was a crazy show too, because again, I'm a fucking wildfire evacuee. So we went up. A friend of mine had just bought like 25 acres on Murder Mountain in southern Humboldt County. And so the safest place that I personally could think of to go when I got evacuated was Murder Mountain, because I'm fucking crazy, I guess. But I was doing that interview from like a park bench in a little town called Garberville, which is somewhat famous from the movie Homegrown. If anybody remembers that or saw that film, big pot growing community there. But there were like homeless people walking around in the background. There were ants crawling all over the picnic table where I was doing the shit. One of them was trying to go directly into my USB hub. It was wild. And yeah, I chain smoke, so I do all my shit outdoors. But yeah, thank you so much, Whitney. It's been fucking great. I'm sorry that I had a maintenance guy come over and run a lawnmower and a weed whacker.
It's all right. Keeps me on my toes.
But yeah, no, I mean, I feel like I'm flexible enough, but I guess I could always, bend a little bit more. But at any rate, thank you so much. That's going to do it for this episode of Slow News Day. There will be multiple action for Assange streams while we're here in DC. We're not going to try and live stream protests. We may. I don't know. We'll figure all that shit out. I love you guys. My name is Steve Poikonen. Good luck to us all.